Hey everybody, welcome to Granddaddy Whiskey. I am Dan, and in this video, we are going to review the latest of the barrel proof releases from Heaven Hill in their Larceny line. But we're also going to answer a very important and exciting question. Has Larceny Barrel Proof finally made the leap to a every batch must-have, high expectation, awesome bourbon? Let's do it. With Larceny Barrel Proof batch A123. I've discussed the naming convention, A123 for this Larceny Barrel Proof, as well as the release schedule in a few different videos that I will link in the comments below. And if you make it to the end of the video, there will be a link to one of those at the end card too. But let's pour this sucker up so we can give it some time while we talk about the deets. Larceny Barrel Proof batch A123. The Larceny Barrel Proof line is understood, alleged, unofficially known to be aged anywhere between 6 and 8 years. But there is no age statement on it, so we can't know for sure or officially from the distillery as to how old it is. And the mash bill on this one is 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malted barley. If you've seen one of my recent videos about Larceny, I'm sorry, but I think the story about how it was named is just really interesting. It's called Larceny, but it's John E. Fitzgerald Larceny. And that's because John E. Fitzgerald, who was a treasury agent who I assume was tasked with overseeing some aspect of the Bourbon bond production at Heaven Hill or its predecessor back in the day, he had a bad habit of using the keys that he was given to the rick house to be able to inspect things. Keys, right here, keyhole, right here, to let himself into the rick houses after hours and to help himself to the barrels that he thought were the best to have, a little nip or two. His favorites were supposedly the wheated barrels. He had some good stuff there, and that's where we got Old Fitzgerald and Johnny Fitzgerald Larceny. We're celebrating the fact that this government official abused his power to steal a bunch of whiskey. Whatever, still a cool story. Now let's see how Larceny Barrel Proof is on the nose. Get the ethanol right away. Whew. The oak is right there. Get the oak. A little bit of sawdustiness that I assume is a combination of the corn and the oak. On the nose, I'm definitely getting more of the corn than I am the wheat. It's a little bit of like maybe a tad dusty corn note. Not like a super aged or oaky corn, not like a super youthful corn. Not green, it's just like a strong corn note. Maybe like a hint of some kind of baking spice there, but that would mainly be like brown sugar with maybe a touch of cinnamon or, yeah, maybe a touch. Not very much at all though. Which makes sense. I feel like cinnamon and baking spice are usually associated with the rye that's in a bourbon, and since this one doesn't have any, I would be surprised to get a ton of baking spice. But I am a little bit surprised that I'm getting as much corn and not really a ton of the wheat on the nose. On the palate. Sort of a similar experience. I'm getting a lot of the corn. It's soft, as I get with a lot of wheated bourbons. I feel like wheat a lot of times, especially when there's only a little bit of it, really just like rounds the edges of a bourbon. And that definitely seems to be the case here. It's like we're getting this sort of sweet corn bomb that's diluted, or that, the edges are a little bit blurred by the wheat, which keeps it from being too corny, but I feel like wheat itself is usually pretty sweet, so it's still a very sweet bourbon. But some wheated bourbons, including Larceny in years past, has come across as being like bitter, or we get that Heaven Hill nuttiness that's really, really strong, and I'm not getting any bitterness, any nuttiness at all with this sip. Just heavy in the corn and some additional sweetness from the wheat. Yeah, more corn, and now the wheat, it's tasting, it's not really like a cereal note at all. It's not super weedy. It's almost coming across as like a faint chocolate note. To get a little like overly hammy or like poetic, like it's almost like the shadow of chocolate is like casted over this, but it's not like super chocolatey at all, but there's like, I don't know, like an air of chocolatiness about the wheat sweetness that this delivers, in addition to the corn, because the corn sweetness really is predominant in the nose and in this sip, which has me feeling like this is almost a little basic. It's good, I enjoy it. But when you have bourbon, you want there to be a lot going on, and for there to be predominantly a corn note, I don't know, I maybe would hope for a little bit more than just that. But let's take another sip, see if this changes at all. Yeah, I don't know that it's changing a whole lot. I'm trying real hard to pick up on the wheat more, and I am, but it's probably just because I'm trying that hard. And the wheat is not really changing this predominantly corn note that I keep picking on. I think I'm gonna place a score of this, probably to grade it to, before we compare it to C922. The score that I'm gonna give Larceny A123 is a 7.2. This is a good bourbon, but it's pretty dang basic. There's corn sweetness, there's some proof. I don't know if I even mentioned the proof, but it's 125.8, so 62.9 ABV, nothing to slouch at. And you don't pick up a ton of the proof, but this really just tastes like corn distillate with wheat rounding the edges a little bit. There's not a lot going on here. It's enjoyable. I do like drinking it, but I was really hoping for more after the 2022 releases. And I'm trying not to let my expectations get in the way when I'm scoring the actual whiskey in this drink. That can go to the grade, but not to the score. 2022 releases were great compared to what Larceny has set up over the past year. The expectations it set for itself over the past year, this does not measure up. I'm disappointed in that this is not reaching anywhere near the highs of 2022, but I actually feel a good amount of solace in the fact that this is still better than so many of the other prior Larceny releases. I'm not picking up on peanuts in this, which is huge. I'm not getting bitterness in this, which is huge. So for Larceny to hit the point where they're really missing on a release, which in my opinion, this probably is a miss, but it still is a good bourbon, that's great. That speaks to the future, but I think it's also gonna put a lot of pressure and maybe a lot of stake on the next release, on Larceny B523. So you can bet I'm gonna be hunting that, but it's really just out of my interest to see where this brand goes. So the grade for this release, all things considered, means I consider the expectations. And the expectations were pretty high after 2022. I think the best grade I can genuinely give this release, even though I do enjoy it, is probably a C-. Unless you're a die-hard Larceny fan, you can probably skip this one. The release schedules for all these Heaven Hill Barrel Proof products are, you know, across the map. Like, who knows what you're gonna be able to find in your area. So if you are able to find some of the older releases, some of the 2022s, if you're really trying to buy a Larceny Barrel Proof, I would probably buy one of those over this one. But I do gotta put my money where my mouth is, so I'm gonna compare this to C922 just to be absolutely sure. C922. As a reminder, this was generally viewed as the best Larceny Barrel Proof release ever, certainly last year. I preferred the A122 to this one, but just because there was one weird note in there that I thought made it a little bit more interesting, and I was definitely in the minority for that view. The C922 is the one that's really viewed as like the Weller killer, which is, I think, the ultimate title that can be bestowed upon any wheated bourbon. Pour a bit. Sip of water. All right, C922. The nose, still just sweetness, but there's a little bit more like chocolate mixed in with just like a corn note. You get that corn note, but there's just some kind of added like chocolatiness to it that makes it maybe a tad bit interesting, but it's not too much different than the A123 on the palate. So it's sweet, but it's pretty rich. There's a fruitiness to it that is very much lacking in the A123, and that is great. It's hard to pin down exactly what it's like, maybe like some kind of berry. It's hard to pin down exactly. It's sort of tame, sort of mild, like it's not spiky at all, but it's definitely there. We're getting some sense of like a mixed berry flavor that's added in with the corn and the chocolate. But the nose is still all just like corn with like a touch of chocolate. It's a clean, bright, fruity, sweet corn chocolate palette. So verdict is in. If you've got a couple different stores in your area and one still has the C922 Larceny Barrel Proof and one has the A123, skip the A123, go back to C922, and then hope for the best for B523. I'm gonna be eagerly awaiting that one, and that might be, you know, the judgment of Larceny Barrel Proof. Normally this is where I would blend these, but they're not really close, so I'm just gonna enjoy a nice C922 Larceny Barrel Proof. Let me know what you think. If you think I'm off my rocker and A123 is the best thing that's hit Larceny Barrel Proof, or we did bourbon in years or whatever, let me know. I don't think you'll think that. I think it's more likely that folks are gonna agree with me on this one, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Either way, leave a comment, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you wanna see more, and until next time, cheers.